Before I joined the church as a full-time staff, I worked as a medical social worker in a public hospital for 6 years. I enjoyed the job very much as I learned a lot from meeting different people and situations which I usually would not come across. The other aspect I enjoyed about the job was the medical benefits that came with it. I enjoyed a highly discounted rate at various medical specialty centres. Because of that, several of my colleagues went to do LASIK, which I regret not doing. But I did something else. I made use of my staff benefit and removed my wisdom tooth at a much lower price. There were 2 reasons I decided to do it. Actually, my wisdom tooth was not causing any trouble, but I heard that it eventually will. So I thought it would be wiser to remove them early. The second reason was that I learned that you could get up to 5 days of hospitalization leave from removing at least 2 wisdom teeth. Back then, my workload was really high, and after a few years of working, I was desperate for a break, although I loved what I did. But annual leave is very precious, right? So I birthed the brilliant idea of going for wisdom tooth surgery to get 5 days of hospitalization leave. I even planned it such that my surgery would fall on Monday and I could get the whole week off. And guess what? I really did it. You must be wondering, was it worth going through so much pain just to take a break from work? I think so. Because sometime later, when I felt that I needed another break, I went for the surgery again to remove the remaining 2 wisdom teeth to get those 5 days of leave. Both times, I had a good rest from the busyness at work, even though I was nursing my wound. But too bad, we only have 4 wisdom teeth, and I have no more to pluck. What is the most desperate thing you have done in order to find rest? I think few of you will be as crazy as me to willingly undergo an excruciating medical procedure to get a break. But I believe you long for rest as much as I did. You very much wish to catch a breather from the non-stop action, take a break from all the stress and pressure, and to simply rest. The thing is this, unless you fall sick and go on a long medical leave, which I don't recommend from my recent experience, or you change to a job that meets all your ideal requirements, which few of us have the luxury to, it is unlikely that we can change our circumstances to find rest. Even after the 5 days of break, I had to return to reality, and the same work, or more work actually, was waiting for me. If the busyness of school, work, family, and church is here to stay, how then can we find rest? Not so much by making major modifications to our circumstances, but by adopting some small, helpful habits consistently. And this is what I would like to share with you in the last message for this series. To do that, we are going to learn from a man how he managed to find rest amidst his busyness. How busy was he? From sunrise to sunset, people swarmed around him. The sick reached out for healing, the seekers pressed in for answers, and the desperate begged for help, leaving him scarcely a moment to himself. In every town he entered, the crowd surged, and their endless needs pressed on him from every side. Yet, despite the non-stop demands and pressure, he was constantly at rest, both physically and internally. This busy but well-rested person is none other than Jesus. This morning, we are going to read about one of his busy moments from Mark chapter 6, verse 30 to 34. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. The disciples had just returned from their first mission trip where they preached, healed, and cast out demons. They were excited, but also worn out. Jesus recognized their need for rest and did 3 practical things to show the disciples how they can find rest amidst the busyness and tiredness. Whether you are a believer or not, you can apply most of what I'm about to share. So, for the rest of us, let's learn from what Jesus did so that we too can find rest. And the first thing is to Guard your priorities. I have a question. What is the longest time you have gone without sleep? Anyone more than 20 hours? More than 20? More than 24? Okay. 30? Oh, also have. Okay. How did it feel? Any guesses? What is the longest time someone has gone without sleep? The record belongs to American Randy Gardner, who stayed awake for 11 straight days when he was 17 in the name of science. In 1964, Randy volunteered to go as long as possible without sleep and let researchers study the changes in his brain activity. By the 10th day, Randy was unable to complete simple mathematical equations and experienced hallucinations and a lot of confusion. Now, with so much awareness about how harmful sleep deprivation can be, the Guinness World Records organization no longer responds to attempted records of sleep deprivation. The fact that our bodies are wired to need physical rest is something that even Jesus, who is fully God and fully human, knew. Let's read Mark chapter 6, verse 31 again. Then because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." Jesus and his disciples were so busy that they could not even eat. Just imagine how many people were surrounding them and how many needs there were to be met. Yet at this juncture, Jesus did something unexpected. He told his disciples to follow him to a quiet place and get some rest. To some people, it may even sound irresponsible to suddenly drop everything at rest. Why did Jesus do that? Firstly, because Jesus knew his disciples were very tired. They had to walk long distances in the hot sun, with only sandals, no extra clothes, no money. They depended on strangers for meals and a place to stay. They often sleep on hard floors or outside. Secondly, Jesus must have also recognized that this wasn't just busyness, it was unsustainable. Jesus knew their bodies needed rest and food to keep serving effectively, even though everything they were doing was good. Jesus stepped in to remind them that not every need could be met at once, and rest was just as essential. Some of us think that unlike the disciples, we know what our priorities should be, but we don't guard them, or we mix them up. Surveys have found that Singapore is one of the most sleep-deprived countries in the world, and the lack of sleep is linked to a culture prioritizing productivity over getting enough sleep, something I can testify to. Being a working mom, I constantly feel hard-pressed for time. I try to leave work on time to bring my children to the playground before dinner, but that also means I can't spend extra time clearing work. In a bid to catch up with work and prevent it from snowballing, I developed the habit of staying up to do work after I put my kids to sleep. I would work late into the night until I couldn't take it anymore, then go to bed for a few hours before waking up and repeating the cycle all over again. After doing that for a while, I started to notice that, like Randy, I was becoming more tired and thinking slower. I wasn't as effective both at work and at home. Decided that this can't go on. And I put an immediate stop to these late nights and prioritize getting rest instead. There are nights that I still have to stay up for certain things, but I try to ensure that I get sufficient sleep on most nights, because when I do, I find that I wake up feeling more energized and more productive. Interestingly, when my mind is refreshed and alert, I can do the same things faster and better. This experience made me learn the importance of guarding my priorities. Are you like me? You feel tired and you know that you need rest, but you still end up prioritizing other things over it. Maybe you can't resist those late night hangouts with your friends for the fear of missing out. Maybe you justify your doom scrolling and gaming as a way to unwind after a long day. But if you keep doing that, you will inevitably end up chronically unrested. Or you belong to those who are very strict about your rest. You sleep by a certain time and almost nothing can disrupt that. I truly admire your discipline, but life doesn't always fit into your bedtime schedule. Being inflexible can cause unnecessary stress or resentment when things don't go as planned. This is where we can learn from Jesus. He knew his priorities. Mark chapter 4, verse 38. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Even in the middle of a raging storm, Jesus was asleep. But he wasn't being lazy or ignorant. He knew the Father's plan. He knew the danger was not beyond God's control. And he knew that his mission would not end by drowning in the sea. So instead of being anxious like the disciples, he rested. Then, when the right moment came, he rose, rebuked the wind, and calmed the waves. He didn't let fear, pressure, or others' expectations dictate his priorities. If we don't know our priorities, we will either burn out by overworking or become exhausted by neglecting our need for rest. What's unique about Jesus is that he wasn't rigid about his schedule, but clear about his priorities. He knew that things don't always go according to plan, and that's okay. So he worked when he needed to, and rested when he needed to. He even knew when to step back from good ministry work. That being said, rest is a priority, but not the only priority we have. I want to remind us from last week's sermon about what the Sabbath teaches us. We cease other activities to prioritize communal worship, because that is a key avenue through which God helps us to find rest for our souls. So the point here is to stop doing unimportant things and guard the important things. That's the first thing we need to do to find rest. The second thing Jesus did was to get away from people. After I graduated from university and went to work, I had a dream of traveling overseas alone. After I got engaged, I felt that I need to quickly fulfill this dream before I got married, because otherwise there'll be little to no chance of doing it. Sadly, I didn't have enough days of leave to make it happen before my wedding. But after about a year of getting married, I unexpectedly had the chance to do so when my senior at my previous workplace passed on the opportunity to attend an overseas conference to me. When she asked if I was interested, I said yes without hesitation. Even though it was just a short 3-day trip to Taipei, I relished the time of flying alone, sleeping alone, eating alone, and walking around alone. There's something charming about being alone. You get to do things at your own pace, make decisions entirely by yourself, and enjoy some silence. This time alone is especially appreciated if you're always surrounded by people at work or at home, because constant interaction does drain us. That's why after telling the disciples to get some rest, the Bible tells us in Mark chapter 6, verse 32, so they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. Remember, at this point, people were chasing after them, there were many needs to be met, and their ministry was booming. But Jesus said, let's take time out from these guys. Let's deliberately step away from the busyness and the crowds. Jesus didn't do that because he was tired of people. He loved them. He and his disciples withdrew even though the crowd still needed them to rest from the demands of people. Being with people is good and necessary, but it can also be draining. When we are with people, we feel the need to be polite, presentable. Our minds are constantly running to keep conversations going. When you have to listen to others' worries, carry their burdens, or deal with difficult people, it can leave us emotionally drained. In a way, it's good because it reminds us of our limits. If we never grew weary, we might think that we could meet everyone's needs by our own strength. Our tiredness points us back to the truth that we need to get away from people at times so we can return to them stronger. Luke chapter 4, verse 42. At daybreak, Jesus went out to a solitary place. The people were looking for him, and when they came to where he was, they tried to keep him from leaving them. The night before, Jesus had been in Capernaum healing many people. The whole town had gathered. He had poured himself out for them. By morning, instead of staying among the crowds, he withdrew to a solitary place. It shows us that even good work like ministry can't be sustained on constant activity. Times of solitude are required to refresh and renew us. The problem is this: we struggle with solitude. Technology has made it easy to stay connected at all times. Our phones buzz with messages, emails, and updates, and many of us feel the constant need to check them. This makes it difficult to step away and be still, because silence now feels very strange when you're used to endless noise and activity. So we keep ourselves occupied even when our bodies and minds need a break from all that. We also tend to misunderstand what solitude is for. Some of us think that it means being lonely or cut off. But biblical solitude is about withdrawing from the noise to be with God, to reflect, and to listen. It is not isolation, but intentional rest in His presence. How can we find time for that in our busy schedules? Okay, unless you are thinking of an extended personal retreat, which can be difficult for many of us to arrange, a more feasible way is to set aside small pockets of time to regularly be away from people and the busyness. As a parent of 3 young children, a lot of my hecticness comes from them. But living with them in a small flat, there isn't anywhere in the house where I can get away from them. So something simple that my husband and I try to do each week is to have a meal together without the kids, thanks to the help of our parents. In that short time, we step away momentarily from the craziness, focus on each other, and reconnect before starting the new week. I think it helps us a lot to preserve our sanity and refresh us. The other thing I practice is putting my phone away or turning off the notifications when I pray and talk to God. I used to get distracted by them as I think I must be instantly available or I'm afraid of missing out on something. But the constant buzz kept my mind restless and made it hard for me to have a quality time with God. Now, after some getting used to, I actually enjoy these moments of silence as it helps to clear my mind. Our day-to-day interactions with people at work, at home, at church, or over the phone, while helpful and essential, can also tire us. In order to experience rest, I encourage all of us to find creative ways in our routines to get away from people, the action, and the noise. Be by ourselves to recuperate and recharge. A word of caution here is that what we choose to do during this solitary time is also very important. It determines if we feel better or worse after spending time alone. If we want to feel better, something that we really need to get away from, other than people, are our phones and the online world, because that is where a lot of the busyness happens also. Whether we are actively responding to the various needs constantly streaming in, or we are passively doom scrolling, being by ourselves, but constantly being on our phones still zaps our mental energy and does little to help us recover from our tiredness. Instead, we should also consider one more thing that Jesus did when He got away from people to find rest, and that is to grow in prayer. I mentioned at the start that Jesus was a very busy man. He worked hard constantly, and unlike us, there wasn't a practice of taking leave to go on a holiday to rest. Those of us who have been Christians for a while would know that when we are busy or tired, one of the first things we tend to forgo is our prayer life. But not Jesus. In fact, the Gospels consistently record Him getting away from people and using that time to pray. In Mark chapter 1, Jesus had been in Simon Peter's house healing Simon's mother-in-law and many others. Jesus must have been physically and emotionally exhausted. But look at what He chose to do next. In verse 35, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where He prayed. Most of us can't imagine waking up while it's still dark. Yet Jesus did it intentionally. He made prayer a priority even before the day began and before the crowds could demand His attention. He withdrew to a quiet and private place for intimate communion with the Father. Then we come to our passage for today in Mark chapter 6. Jesus told His disciples to rest at a quiet place, but the crowds found them. Moved with compassion, He ministered to them and performed the famous miracle of feeding the 5,000. Afterwards, He sent the disciples away, dismissed the crowd, and in verse 46 says, after leaving them, He went up to a mountainside to pray. When we are on a high, we tend to want to keep on going. But Jesus deliberately stopped the action and excitement to pray. Jesus modeled a life of consistent prayer. What I used to wonder was, why did Jesus have to pray so hard since he's the Son of God? His practice shows us that even the Son of God needed time alone with the Father to sustain him amid constant demands. Prayer was a way to rest his soul. By withdrawing to pray, Jesus demonstrates that true rest comes not only from ceasing activity, but from reconnecting with God. Those of you who are believers, you likely understand and agree with the importance of growing in prayer to feel connected and rested in God. But the truth is, many of us struggle to pray because we are too tired or too busy. I recall feeling this way for a long time too, until I had a paradigm shift when I read the great American evangelist Billy Graham's biography. Billy Graham lived one of the busiest lives imaginable. He preached to over 210 million people in 185 countries, often speaking at multiple crusades a week, while also writing books, leading his association, hosting media programs, meeting world leaders, and counseling individuals. Constantly in demand from the media, churches, and governments, his life was a whirlwind of travel, preaching, and meetings alongside family responsibilities. What's amazing is this. He wrote that the busier he was, the more convicted he was about the need to pray. The more tasks he had, the longer he would pray. He believed in starting the day with prayer to set the tone for his day and ministry before everything comes crashing in. His dependence on prayer is evident from what he said, that true prayer is a way of life, not just for use in cases of emergency. His example inspired me to pray before starting each day's overwhelming work in the hospital. Although I couldn't wake up a few hours earlier to do it, even that 10 minutes of prayer on the way to office helped to calm me and recenter my motivations on God's purposes. I couldn't keep plucking my wisdom teeth, but I could definitely rely on prayer to find a more constant and deeper rest. Then 3 years ago, when I took over the youth ministry, I had the greatest and realest fear that the ministry would fall apart in my hands. I was feeling burdened and stressed, and Billy Graham's example came to mind again. Still, it was tempting to spend the time doing instead of praying. But I knew this is not going to work unless God's in it. So I intentionally carved out time to pray for the ministry regularly, and over time, I felt less anxious because prayer helped me remember God's in control and He is in charge. The point is this: the busier we are, the more, not less, we need to pray. Luke chapter 5, verse 15. Yet the news about him, Jesus, spread all the more, so that crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their illnesses. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Jesus withdrew from people and the work not to do nothing, but to draw near to God. That's where he found the rest and strength he needed to carry on with his ministry. If you are swamped with endless things to do, or you are feeling exhausted by the demands of life, consider growing in prayer. The Gospels consistently record Jesus going to solitary places to pray. Not to fast, worship, or read, which I'm sure he did too, but they highlighted Jesus' habit of prayer. There must be something special about prayer. It is the spiritual discipline where we directly pour out our burdens and transfer the weight to God. In prayer, we can cry, confess, or sit silently. Prayer uniquely addresses our restless hearts by giving us a space to unload our troubles before an almighty God. So, how can we find rest in the middle of life's demands? We can follow what Jesus did with these 3 steps. Guard your priorities, get away with people, and grow in prayer. And now that the series is coming to an end, I can rest. That's what I joked with the people around me before it started. Who knew I would be forced to rest in the middle of it? But that wasn't the only way I found rest in the thick of it. Let me share with you my personal reflection to wrap up this series. On the Saturday before the first message, I had a very long day. I sent my child to class in the morning, sent her back, went to attend an ex-youth wedding, go to youth service, and although I wasn't preaching that day, I conducted the altar call, I made some announcements, and I spoke to a youth after service. Then I went off to prepare for next day's sermon. By the time I was done, it was almost 11 p.m. On the way home, I started feeling more tired than usual because even my body was aching. Then a thought came to me. Actually, physical tiredness is not so hard to relieve. I just need to be disciplined when I reach home. Quickly bathe, go to bed, and get enough rest to preach the next day. So I did that. And I was ready for bed earlier than expected. But that's when a temptation set in. I'm following a Korean drama. And the new episodes are released every Saturday and Sunday night. Since I was ahead of time, I thought maybe I can afford to watch the new episode. After all, I deserve a treat, right? After a long and hard day. Make a guess if I watched it. Why you like that? I was glad I didn't. I guarded my priorities. I told myself I must really rest. So I lie down on my expensive bed. But strangely, I couldn't fall asleep. This time, it was not because of how hard the bed is. It was because there were a lot of thoughts racing through my mind. How will the sermon turn out tomorrow? Will it be okay? Did I miss out anything? Should I do an altar call? What if nobody responds? I wanted to sleep, but I couldn't. I was kept awake by my anxieties and worries about the sermon. That's when I realized that compared to physical rest, mental and spiritual rest is harder to find. Eventually, I did fall asleep, thank God, and the next day when I came to church, something amazing happened. For the first time since I started preaching at the adult service, my legs weren't shaking beneath my pants. I felt, strangely, a sense of calm, even when I conducted the altar call for the first time here. And I was wondering, what's going on? And I sensed that God wanted me to experience what it means to be at rest internally. I can stand on stage to preach and do ministry time with restedness because He will take care of the outcome. At the same time, the outcome does not change what God thinks of me and His love for me. It was a significant experience for me. But unfortunately, after that, God decided that I need a lot of physical rest. Brothers and sisters, I believe it is this deep inner rest that Jesus wants to give to us. Our bodies need rest, but it's not so difficult to have that if we take some practical steps. However, it is the rest for our souls that is harder to find. We are not just caught up in the busyness of doing, it's also the proving and striving that's making our souls weary. And only Jesus can uniquely solve that problem. You see, why does Jesus say, "Come with me to get some rest"? Why doesn't Jesus say, "All of you, go and find a quiet place by yourself to get some rest"? These words are so crucial because there are essentially two kinds of rest. Rest with Jesus and rest without Jesus. Human beings are not only physical but also spiritual creatures. We need not just relaxation but also restoration. Physical rest can give us the relaxation that we need, but only Jesus can fill the deep need in our souls. That's why He said the words we looked at in the first message. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." If you are not a follower of Jesus Christ, consider His invitation to give you rest. You can practice the steps I shared with you, but until and unless you have Jesus in your heart, you will never experience a rest so deep and so life-changing. To my brothers and sisters in Christ, that is why so often you still cannot find rest. Because all we are aiming for is the rest that the world gets, rest without Jesus. But to get rest with Jesus, we need to stop doing many other things that we are doing. That is, we need to guard our priorities. To get rest with Jesus, we need to get away from people. And to experience rest with Jesus, we need to intentionally set aside time for prayer. Shall we bow our heads? And let's pray. Father in heaven, thank you for knowing the kind of rest we really need and offering it to us through your Son, Jesus Christ. All of us here may be feeling tired and weary in different ways and because of different reasons. Some of us due to work, some of us due to our studies, our worries about our performance. Maybe it's a relationship that is making us tired. Maybe because of illnesses, finances, our worries for our future, the stress of parenting, the issues at home. But no matter what the reason, you know and you see it all. And Jesus, you are telling us that regardless the situation or problem, we can still find rest by coming away with you. I pray for my brothers and sisters, and even for myself, that we'll learn to intentionally set aside our time and attention, set aside our work and devices to find rest in you, whether it be by talking, by reflecting, or being still. Teach us to cut out the noise in our lives, guard the truly important and necessary things, and learn to have rest that is with you so we can feel deeply rested in our souls, even if life gets busy or tough. Jesus, I want to thank you for the rest we get to have because of your love and your sacrifice. And we look forward to the rest that we will enjoy for all eternity in your presence. In whose most precious name we pray, amen.